It's a good time to show you in this yard what is being done in the fall and the winter to keep it looking good and to prepare it for next spring. This one happens to be in California, but we can apply it to gardens all over the country. You've probably seen on our channel this yard and garden, which we showed you a couple months back, probably the middle of the summer. It looked terrible. Even though it was nicely designed, it was a disaster. The owners were convinced nothing would grow here because everything had died, and a lot of you, I know, have that same feeling. Probably the main tip would be recognize the change in temperatures requires you change how you water. And the sooner you do that, the better. You go from summer where you're watering a lot to fall and winter where you shouldn't water much. And it's really bad for plants to overwater any time of the year. These plants, in many cases, go into dormancy and the soil gets cold, and so you don't need to water. Usually, from about December 1 to March 1, we can either turn off the water or have it come on just once a week, like for a minute. And that keeps the valves working, opening and closing, and so you don't have cracked diaphragms and such once the weather warms up. That's in our area. Completely different in all parts of the country depending on what your weather is. But for the most part, keep in mind that when it gets cold, soil is cold and it's not active, and plants are cold and they're not active. We're here on the day that Enrique, their gardener, does the maintenance. Enrique is going to train the Wisteria on the arbor. We just completed that about 8 months ago. The Wisteria is growing, but it's just kind of growing where it wants to grow. And then he's deadheading roses. We still have a lot of roses blooming, as you can see. Fruit trees are just about to go into dormancy. Right now we're doing nothing on them, the deciduous fruit trees, but they'll be pruned in the winter months right up until early spring. Other than that, the landscape is young enough that there's not a lot of pruning required. So these roses that are really visible around the lawn, most of them, not all of them, are what we call landscape roses. It might be a horrifying sight to see this many roses. Landscape roses aren't horrifying because they don't require a lot of maintenance, and you don't need to do any special pruning or any of the pruning that you would go to a school or a club to learn about. Pruning is just kind of cutting off the dead flowers and making them be the shape and the size you want them to be.
Let me take the weed out. Hold on. We don't want to see no weed. So right now we're just going to show you a little bit about these ground cover roses. I'm going to show you how to maintain them, how to get them ready for winter. First of all, you got to look for the runners, right? Big runners like these ones. You got to make sure you cut them right at the leaf, right there. Make sure they're not overlapping. And like right here, this is a good example. You see all the runners right here? They're all already growing on top of this one, in between of it. You don't want that. You want to make sure you have a nice clean area around it, so that way they look nice and properly maintained. These ones right here, you want to make sure you keep them short, right? Because you want them to expand and spread to the sides, but we don't want them overcrowding these guys right here. And of course, you see any dead ones, cut them. If you're able to see, you got new growth right here. You want to cut them right in front of it, so that way you get your new flowers there.
Now they do have some hybrid tea roses here. Those require a different kind of pruning, the kind of pruning you would take a class to learn about. So in the winter here in Fresno, I don't like to prune the roses too early because sometimes we'll have a few days of unusually warm weather, and if you've pruned them, they start to bud and start to sprout too early. I usually do the pruning more in January and February, right before the weather is going to turn warm and we want them to sprout. And that's also when I would use blend and penetrate liquid biotiller. Enrique hasn't done anything to the lawn in a few weeks because it's a hybrid Bermuda lawn and it was overseeded with perennial ryegrass. And that is only necessary if you have some kind of warm season grass and you want it to look green through the winter. All those warm season grasses will go dormant in the winter because of cold temperatures. They don't die, they just go dormant. And if they go dormant, they look brown, which nothing wrong with that, but some people want the lawn to be green all year round. If you choose to not overseed, then what is needed is even less. You would maybe mow it once as it turns brown, and that way it'll look neat and tidy. Some people might have some weeds, and so maybe you would mow it once a month or something if you have some weeds growing.
It's gonna be the first time we mow because we overseed. About 3 weeks ago, it's about the right time. And after that, if it's too high, you can use more once a week. During winter time, sometimes you can go by up to not mowing it for 2 weeks, but most of the time it's once a week. It makes it look nice. Nothing looks uneven as on the growth of the lawn. And of course helps making the property look nice.
One thing in our climate, we can fertilize because we have warm enough weather to activate the fertilizer. There are active campaigns from fertilizer companies to get you to fertilize in the fall and even early winter. And in many parts of the country, I think that's just a waste of money and not productive, because if the soil is dormant and the plants are dormant and you use some kind of fertilizer, when you get moisture, it'll break down that fertilizer, and that fertilizer will want to leach through the soil without anything capturing it. In some climates like this, especially when we planted this lawn, when Enrique planted the seed, is a very good strategy to use our fertilizer products because it was still warm enough for them to activate. They help the seed germinate, and then they feed the new seedlings once they do germinate. House has this beautiful arbor that flanks the pool. The intent of the design was to have a wisteria growing on it, and wisteria is a real strong growing vine. So if you're going to grow wisteria on some kind of overhead structure, it needs to be a really sturdy structure. We did this the beginning of this year, probably late spring, and they've grown pretty well, but now they need to be trained because they don't stick to a post. They kind of grow around it and twine around it, and you need to give it some help.
So we're gonna start here because we gotta give some credit to John because he already fertilized it. We got fertilized right here. It's ready fertilized. John and Bob's doing the magic. What we're gonna do right here, you wanna make sure you leave some big lines, bring them up the post, bring them straight up. We'll tie them up. There's a little example of green tape right here. How is it done? That tape, it's meant for this kind of stuff, you know, it stretches with the plant as the plant grows. Of course, this one needs a little bit of pruning because you want to make sure you got straight lines, not tangles like nuts like this, because then you have big bunches right here. We don't want that. We want these guys to be straight on the post and then spread up on the top. Let me show you a good example of those over here. This plant right here, I pruned a lot of it from the footing already, and this one is a great example of how is it gonna go. Right there. You gotta prune the bottom of it so that way the plant concentrates the growth energy to the top and not on the bottom. And if you look up there, you see all the new stuff growing into the arbor, which eventually we're hoping for this whole section to be filled up with wisteria plant.
This will probably be the last time we have to tie it because wisteria is going to go dormant, and then we'll let it grow some more and tie it again in the months to come. I'd say in another 2 years, I think we might be able to get it to cover this whole arbor, which will be pretty spectacular. If you keep watching, we'll show you when that happens. In general, I like to prune deciduous trees after they drop their leaves if we want them to grow more. If we want them to grow less, then I would wait until they sprout all their leaves in the spring, even get into mid-spring, and then prune them, because by doing that, we're kind of tricking the tree and controlling its growth, because the reason it puts on all that growth in the spring and the summer is to feed more growth through photosynthesis and just the natural growth of the tree. And if we cut a lot of that growth off, then we're controlling its ability to grow more. They have a lot of deciduous fruit trees here, and they have a lot of crepe myrtles, and they have flamethrower cercis. After they drop their leaves in the winter months would be a good time to prune them because they're so small, and we wouldn't mind if they got a little bigger.
Since they're so young right now, there's not much to do with it, but you definitely want to go around and look for suckers, which are always at the bottom of the trunk, like these ones. You gotta make sure you cut them, so that way all the energy of the tree goes up to the branches and doesn't waste anything on the bottom. You can go around, kind of try to look for those branches that are, you know, crooked, bent, or not growing straight. Clip them off. Anything that it's, you know, that is not gonna produce fruit like this. These ones won't produce any fruit, so you wanna clip them. You know, but as of right now, this tree doesn't need that much, but that's what we usually recommend on fruit trees. Going around looking for suckers, any dead branches, any stuff that it's not growing right, and just clip them.
For citrus, I like to do Not much. We've encouraged them during the year to be as healthy as possible. I'm not a fan of covering them in any way. If you're growing them like these people are growing them, it's not their livelihood. What you're protecting is the crop, not the tree. And although we want the crop, it's not worth the trouble of building structures and trying to cover them specially. I try to address that by getting the soil as healthy as possible and getting the plant as healthy as possible. And then usually they'll be fine and the crop will be fine. But if the crop isn't fine, at least the tree survives and you're ready for next year. To kill these citrus, we would need incredibly low temperatures, like historically low temperatures. Almost not going to happen here in Fresno, probably less than 20 degrees. So blend is great in the fall because we think we're going to have some rain, and that's a really good way to incorporate it. The only thing I worry about using blend in real cold weather climates is it has fertilizer in it, and so you might not be getting the most for your money. So in California and climates similar to California, you could apply blend right through the end of November, and it's a good use of the product. In areas that have colder weather, you could apply blend through the end of September, and October, November, December, I would apply only Optimize, and those will both give you really good values. Hopefully you found the restoration of this landscape helpful. Give us comments if you have questions, if you want to know anything about maintenance of your own garden, let us know and we'd be happy to help. The very first video we did at this garden is good to look at because it's quite a contrast. We're pretty pleased with the progress that was made. Check that one out if you want to be depressed for a short time and then have this giant, massive uplift when you see the success that we've been able to have, and that is possible in every landscape and garden if you recognize the power of soil. We think the soil was a big part of it, plus a good maintenance regimen.